Have you ever heard about a family just vanishing? Like one day they're living their normal lives, they're going to work, they're running errands, they're taking care of the kids, and then the next, they're gone. No warning, no goodbyes, just nothing. That's exactly what happened to the McStay family. Joey and Summer, along with their two little boys, Gianni and Joey Jr., were last seen on February 4th of 2010. They had just moved into a new home in Fallbrook, California. This was a quiet, family-friendly neighborhood. But then, almost overnight, they disappeared. No calls, no messages, just an empty house, their two dogs left behind, and a car that later turned up abandoned near the Mexican border. For years, people thought maybe they'd run off, started over somewhere new. But then in 2013, everything changed. A motorcyclist riding through the Mojave Desert stumbled across something that no one ever expected: shallow graves with 4 sets of remains. The McStays hadn't left, they'd been murdered. The question now isn't where they went, it's who did this and why. Welcome to Beach House 34. I'm your host, Christine Worth, and tonight is the episode of The McStay Family, a twisted trail of secrets. Joey McStay had a company that he had grown from the ground up, and his company was called Earth Inspired Products. And what they did is he specialized in high-end water features. So if you've ever been into a building where they have like a wall of water there, that is the kind of thing that he imagined and with his business associate created. It was a niche market for sure, but Joey had turned it into a business that had upcoming million-dollar contracts. At the heart of his success was his business associate, Chase Merritt. And this is the guy who would take Joey's ideas and turn them into reality. And together, they were on the brink of something huge. They had contracts worth over $11 million coming down the pipeline. But no matter how busy that Joey was, he wasn't the kind of guy to let work take over his life. Family came first. Joey actually had 3 sons. One was from a previous marriage, and his name was Jonah. And then his current marriage, he had 2 other sons, and they were younger, and they were named Gianni and Joey Jr. They were his world, all 3 of the kids. No matter who was there, what was going on, he made sure that he was involved in the kids' lives. And then there was Summer, Joey's wife. She was fiercely protective. She was strong-willed and deeply, deeply devoted to her boys. And she made it her mission to give them the best life possible. In November of 2009, the McStays moved to Fallbrook, California. This was a new home and a fresh start. It wasn't their dream home just yet. They had bought a foreclosed home and planned to fix it up together. But for Joey, it was kind of a step in, home ownership and stability for the family. Shortly after they settled into this house, someone in the family, most likely Summer, began looking into Spanish language learning software on Craigslist. Fallbrook had a large Spanish-speaking population, and maybe she wanted her kids to pick up the language. Or was there another reason? Just days before they vanished, on January 27th of 2010, someone in the McStay home searched online for information about traveling to Mexico and getting passports for the children. Was this a coincidence? Was it a family vacation? Or was something else kind of going on behind the scenes? January 31st of 2010, this was a happy occasion. It was Joey Jr.'s 3rd birthday. The McStays celebrated surrounded by family and friends. They were completely unaware that in just a few days, their lives would take a chilling turn. Then on February 3rd, something odd happens. A search is made on the McStay family computer about creating invitations for a child's birthday party. But Joey Jr. had just had his party, and Gianni's wasn't until July. Was Summer planning something for a friend? Was she planning just that far ahead for Gianni? Or was there another reason? That same day, on February 3rd, a friend comes over to paint the McStay home and spends nearly half the day there. This man, whose identity has never been publicly revealed, is the last known person to see Summer and the boys alive. Was this a trusted friend or someone who knew more, maybe, than they'd let on? Later that day, also on the 3rd, Summer makes a small purchase. It was $66 worth of items from a Ross store in Vista, and this included educational toys. Hardly the kind of shopping spree that someone planning to disappear would make, right? The morning of February 4th seemed really ordinary. Summer talks to her sister. She makes plans to visit her and meet her new baby, plans that she unfortunately will never get the chance to keep. At noon, Joey leaves home in his Isuzu Trooper, and he's heading towards a restaurant in Rancho Cucamonga. This is nearly 90 minutes away. And what he's doing is he's meeting with his business associate, Chase Merritt. While they're there, they discuss work. At least that's what Chase later claims. At 2:36 that day, Summer is again online purchasing beach bags and infant pajamas and a few other things from the same Ross store in Vista. These are small details, just small things like, hey, let's just go ahead and pick these up. Was she preparing for an upcoming trip? Or, was this just another normal shopping day for a mom of two? By 3:52 p.m., someone in the house is still searching on Craigslist for children's toys, and we would again assume that this is Summer. At 4:25 that afternoon, a call is made from the McStay home to Joey's cell phone. His cell phone pings off of a Fallbrook tower, meaning that he was back in town. This would be the last known outgoing call from their home. Between 5 and 5:47 p.m., Joey and Summer exchange text messages, but the contents of these had never been released. Were they just casual messages? Was something urgent happening? Then at 7:47 p.m., a neighbor's security camera captures the McStay's Isuzu Trooper pulling out of their cul-de-sac. But here's the kind of chilling part about this. The footage is so grainy, you can't tell who's inside. 8:28 that night. So about 30 minutes after their vehicle has left the cul-de-sac, Joey's cell phone pings in Fallbrook. He makes one final call, and this one was to Chase Merritt. Now, this phone call goes unanswered. After that, there's just silence. There's no more phone activity. There's no more security footage. There's no more signs of life. The McStay family had just vanished. So let's talk about the day that the McStays vanished. So 2 people, as far as we know, were the last to see the family alive. The first one was the family friend who had been painting inside the McStay home on February 3rd. His identity remains unknown in public records. What we do know is that he was the last person to see Summer and the boys. The second person was Chase Merritt. This was Joey's business associate and the man who helped build Earth-inspired products. They had met at a restaurant in Rancho Cucamonga just that day, reportedly, to discuss work. But was it just business? Before we go any further, let's talk a little bit about Summer. Who was Summer McStay? While Joey was busy running his company, Summer stayed home raising their 2 young boys. She was a devoted, protective, and deeply invested mother. Even in the days before they vanished, she was planning, she was buying toys, she was purchasing these beach items, looking into sending invitations for some kind of event. It all pointed to her and a family looking forward about the future. But Summer had a few mysteries of her own. Her real name wasn't Summer, it was Lisa Aranda. Now, at times, she also went by Lisa Martelli, her stepfather's last name, though she had never been legally adopted by him. Why did she change her name? Well, to Summer. No one really knows. And then there's something else. The night before she and Joey got married, Summer made an abrupt decision, evidently, and called her family and told them not to come to the wedding. Why? We don't know. So, how was their marriage? Well, before Joey met Summer, he had been married once before. His first wife gave birth to their son, Jonah. And though their marriage ended in 1998, the commitment to co parenting never wavered. Jonah was a huge part of Joey's life. They shared custody, and Jonah spent a great deal of time with his dad. Now, at first, Summer seemed to welcome Jonah. She embraced this blended family. But over time, she began to, I don't know if I want to say resent him, but she started to feel as if the time that Joey spent with Jonah equated to less time with her boys, Gianni and Joey Jr., and it kind of became a point of tension. Now, Joey's business partner, Chase, he later claimed that Joey, quote unquote, put up with Summer's controlling nature. But despite this, Joey loved Summer very, very, very deeply. Shortly before their disappearance, however, Joey had suspected that Summer was having an affair. Now, he never confronted her outright, but the concern weighed on him so much that he actually lined up a family counselor to work on their marriage. And this counseling session, it was scheduled to take place just before they vanished. Was Joey hoping to fix their marriage or address this issue? Or, had he already maybe made a decision that Summer wouldn't have liked? Then there was the house itself. The McStays they'd recently moved to Fallbrook, California, into this foreclosed home that they planned to renovate. Joey saw potential in this house, a fresh start, this family project. But Summer, she didn't like it. The house needed work, and its location, according to Summer, it was far too close to a truck stop that made her uneasy. And she even called the neighborhood ugly. She never wanted to move there in the first place. So let's get back to when the family actually went missing. Because now we're introduced to Joey's father, Patrick. And Joey and his father talked almost every day. It was just simply their routine. So when Patrick tries to call Joey and Joey doesn't answer on the 5th, and this would be the day after the family has gone missing, he didn't panic. Not yet. Maybe Joey was busy. Maybe he'd call back later. But as time went on, something just didn't feel right. And then on the 5th, something kind of strange happened. Patrick received a call from someone called D. Kavanaugh. Now, this name didn't mean anything to him. He saw it come through on his cell phone. So he just said, decline the phone call. But what happened is that later he got an email from the same name, and this got his attention. He was really confused about who this guy was. So Patrick then called his other son, Michael McStay, and said, "Who is Dan Kavanaugh?" Michael explained that Dan was Joey's web designer, and he was the guy who was responsible for running his business website. Dan's pay was tied to the website's performance, and now he couldn't reach Joey either. Now, at first, Patrick was hopeful. The Joey and Summer and the kids, they were known to take these spontaneous trips. Maybe this was all that this was. Maybe they had just gone off the grid for a few days. But by Sunday night, full onset of worry had set in. Joey's phone was now going straight to voicemail. His messages were full. Patrick had gone 4 days without hearing from his son, and that has never happened before. So Patrick then called Michael again and said, "Hey, can you go check on Joey's house?" But Michael said no, he was just too busy. And Patrick pleaded with him over and over, but Michael didn't go, at least not right away. And to say that Patrick was upset would be, well, such an understatement. Looking back though, why didn't Patrick call 911 for a welfare check? Or even ask his ex-wife Susan, who lived less than 2 hours away, to check in on Joey? Maybe she wasn't around. We don't know. But we do know that 911 was there. Could have called for a welfare check. Not sure why he didn't. Now, hindsight like this, it makes these decisions really frustrating. But at the same time, no one could even begin to imagine what the truth was. So by the time law enforcement got involved, it was already too late. A BOLO, a be on the lookout, was issued for the family's Isuzu Trooper, and police found it abandoned 4 days later, 4 days after they'd been missing, at a shopping mall near the Mexican border in San Ysidro. Then came this footage. Surveillance cameras near the border captured a family of 4 walking towards Mexico. The parents matched Joey and Summer's height and build, and the 2 children, they looked small enough to be Gianni and Joey Jr. The problem was it was grainy, the footage was far from conclusive, but it was enough for investigators to kind of latch onto a theory that, hey, had the McStays just crossed into Mexico willingly? But here's the problem with this theory. Summer evidently was terrified of Mexico, and family members insisted she would never take her 2 little boys into Mexico. And yet, someone in the McStay home had searched for information about taking kids to Mexico and getting passports just days before the family vanished. Was this coincidence, or was something else kind of going on? So Patrick McStay, he had to feel super frustrated. He's actually in Texas. He doesn't live in California. And he kind of got tired and frustrated with the lack of progress that the police were doing. So what he did is he hired a private investigator there in Texas to dig deeper. That PI, in turn, reached out to an investigative journalist, someone he had worked with before. And together, they made their first stop. They went to California and they went to the McStay home. And what they found and what they experienced was pretty shocking. They met up with Michael, and he let them in right away. The PI and the journalist kind of hesitated. They're like, shouldn't this be a crime scene? Should there be police tape, investigators combing through the evidence? But there wasn't. And Michael also didn't seem concerned. Inside the home, though, they discovered the family's double stroller. The McStays never went anywhere without this double stroller. And on the double stroller were also the boys' laptops. These also always went with the boys, and they were left behind and untouched. This didn't look like it was a family that had planned to leave. But the San Diego Sheriff's Department, they weren't treating it as a crime. They had labeled this case as the family had done this voluntarily. They had gone on some sort of vacation. On February 9th, Chase Merritt, Joey's business associate, drove down to the McStay home himself. He also had not been able to reach Joey, and he was now standing in front of the house, and he knew that it was very, very clear that something was wrong. And he too, like Patrick, called Michael and said, "Hey, you need to come and check on the house." Michael finally agreed, and the 2 of them went inside. And according to Chase, nothing seemed off, really, except for the kitchen and the living area. On the kitchen counter, There were rotting eggs sitting there. Dirty diapers had been left out, probably just in the garbage, but whatever it was really starting to smell up the house. And popcorn, there were two small bowls of popcorn that were spilled all over the futon in the living room. To Chase, rightly so, this was a red flag, right? Something had happened. And he pushed Michael to call the police. But Michael hesitated, and Chase would not let it go. If Michael wouldn't call, then he was going to. So on February 10th, the San Diego County Sheriff's deputies finally conducted a welfare check. And evidently, they didn't go inside. They looked around the house, but didn't find any signs of forced entry or violence and just kind of moved on. So during all of this, Chase Merritt, Joey's business associate, had been in contact with Susan, who is Joey and Michael's mother, about all of this, and had told her that he'd been driving by the house. Something wasn't right. The house wasn't normal. Michael, though, felt pretty reassured because Susan was in constant contact with Chase. And as long as Chase was keeping an eye on things, then Michael really wasn't worried. So on February 13th, this is 8 days after Joey, Summer, and the boys disappeared, Michael went to the house with his mother, Susan. Joey and Summer's dogs, Bear and Digger, were in the backyard. They had been left without food or water for days. And inside, it definitely looked like the family had left in a hurry. And I know this sounds like I'm repeating myself, but there is a point to this. The dogs, the food, the state of the home, it was clear that the McStays, they hadn't planned to leave for long. Yet Michael didn't officially report them missing until February 15th. This means that 2 days had passed between his visit and reporting them missing to the police. 5 days had passed since the initial welfare check, and 10 days had passed since the last confirmed contact with the family. Why did it take so long to make the call? Now, Michael later defended this delay, saying that if the family had taken a 3-day weekend and extended it into the following weekend, it would have been a quote unquote 10-day stint. But surely the rotting food, the abandoned dogs, the popcorn mess in the living room, shouldn't this have set off some alarm bells? So here's where things get a little messy, right? There are two versions of what happened when Chase and Michael entered the house. In one interview, Chase claimed that he and Michael first entered on the 9th. In another statement, Michael claimed that he and Chase entered on the 13th through an unlocked window. And somewhere along the way, Susan was also involved in this. Whichever version is true, the same details are still there. The food, the popcorn, the smell of old diapers, the dogs, for crying out loud, that were left outside in the backyard with no food and water. Did he give them food and water when he was there? And then there's this other layer. Susan, when she went to the house, brought along the family friend who had been painting the house on February 3rd. And he immediately noticed that some things were out of place. The futon in the living room happened to be missing a cover. Dried paint was still sitting in a tray, just kind of drying out. And there were clothes scattered on the bedroom floor. And yet the police were not treating this as a crime scene. When Michael did finally call the sheriff's department on February 15th, homicide detectives were then finally alerted. But there was a problem. Before they could conduct like a formal search of the house, they needed a warrant. So what they did instead is they locked up the house and just kind of walked away. There was no crime scene tape. There were no notices on the door. There was no forensic sweep, nothing. It took 4 more days to get a warrant. During that time, the house remained unsealed and anyone could go inside. And some did. How much evidence was lost in that time? We'll never know. With no police presence and no crime scene tape, the McStay home was open to anyone. Now, Michael McStay, his mother Susan, and a family friend did enter the house. They weren't trespassing, they had been given permission. But what happened next kind of complicated the case even further. Susan, who was disturbed by the rotting food, the spoiled diapers, the smell, she cleaned the kitchen with bleach. She wiped down surfaces, likely erasing any or some potential evidence. Meanwhile, Michael and his family friend searched for bank statements. And then, probably the most shocking of all, investigators gave Michael the okay to remove some items from the house. So Michael took Joey's computer and an SD card. He later claimed that he had gotten this to retrieve the family's pictures off the computer and download them, and then he put the files back before he returned the computer to the house, all before this warrant was issued. How much digital evidence could have been lost in that process? And again, we'll never know. So now things are kind of moving a little bit faster. February 19th, the homicide investigators finally obtain a search warrant for the McStay home, their vehicles, and their computers. What they found was no signs of struggle inside the house. On the 23rd, Interpol issues an international alert for the missing family because remember, they think they're in, or at least the San Diego Sheriff's Department believes that they're in Mexico. On the 25th, authorities then distribute missing person flyers and begin to check airports, bus stations, and travel hubs, in and around Mexico. On March 5th, that grainy border crossing footage is released to the public. And then nothing. No new leads, no breakthroughs, no trace of the McStay family. The case just stalled. With the investigation now, kind of stagnant, it's time to ask, who in the McStay family circle had something to gain, right? So let's first look at Michael McStay, Joey's brother. Michael took money from Joey's accounts in the weeks after his disappearance. He withdrew funds and he sold off Joey's personal property. His explanation for this was that he feared that the house was heading into foreclosure and he didn't want Joey's ex-wife Heather and their son Jonah to suffer. Maybe he truly believed he was doing the right thing. And, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this question. But if a house is under investigation by the police, could it still then be foreclosed on? I mean, I suppose, right? But Michael's timing was definitely suspicious. On February 6th, this is 2 days after the McStays went missing, Dan Kavanaugh began taking money from Joey's business accounts. Now, at this point, no one was even alarmed. The McStays hadn't even been officially reported missing. Dan claimed that he needed $2,000 from Joey's PayPal account to keep the business running, or they were going to lose everything. The family agreed to this. They didn't want the company to collapse, but it wouldn't even have been the company. It's just the website. But, let's be real. Anyone who's ever run a website knows that you don't need $2,000 overnight just to keep a site online, unless you're doing something really, really shady. Was Dan just an opportunist? Or did he know that the McStays were not coming back? If Dan Kavanaugh had anything to do with Joey McStay's disappearance, he evidently wasn't anywhere near the crime scene. At least that's what he claimed. According to authorities, Dan was actually in Hawaii at the time the McStay family vanished. Photos did surface online of him on vacation with friends, seemingly proving that he wasn't even in California. But how thoroughly was that alibi actually checked? Did investigators verify his travel records, his flights, his hotel rooms, his time, all those timestamps? Did they pull metadata from the photos to confirm when and where these pictures were taken? Did they look at financial transactions? to see if he spent any money in Hawaii when he claimed that he was there. It's unknown, really, how deep investigators actually dug into this. Maybe Dan was just an opportunist, cashing in on Joey's disappearance. Or maybe he knew more than he ever let on. If Dan Kavanaugh cashed in, then Chase Merritt, Joey's business associate, was literally drowning in debt. Now, Chase was responsible for turning Joey's water feature designs into reality. But behind the scenes, his financial life was literally crumbling. In November of 2009, so just shortly before Joey and the family went missing, Chase's personal bank account was forcibly closed due to mismanagement. He had gambling debts and had racked up $15,000 in casino withdrawals. And back in 2008, so a year earlier, Joey had even written him a check for $3,000 in order to help cover his rent. Now, Chase was completely dependent on Joey's business for income. And just days before the McStay family vanished, Chase's actions became even more suspicious. So here are the red flags that kind of led up to this. On February 1st of 2010, this is days before the family even goes missing, Chase created 2 checks in Joey's business account, his QuickBooks account, and then he deletes them. On the 2nd, he does the same thing again. On the 4th, the day that Joey vanished, Chase manipulated checks multiple times. And on the 5th, the checks were printed but backdated to February 4th. On February 9th, Chase then cashes those checks the same day that the McStays were actually reported missing. So why does this matter? Well, by deleting the checks inside of QuickBooks, Chase erased the official digital record. Then, by manually printing and cashing the checks, he ensured that Joey wouldn't see the transactions. But what's even more suspicious is that on February 9th, the same day that he cashed these checks, Chase called QuickBooks customer service. He pretended to be Joey. He requested that the entire QuickBooks account be deleted. The call was traced back to Chase's phone number, and a QuickBooks representative later confirmed that this kind of request was highly, highly unusual. So, what happened at this last meeting that Joey and Chase had? Well, remember, they had decided to meet for a lunch at a restaurant in Rancho Cucamonga. Maybe they just talked about business, or maybe Joey had discovered Chase's financial fraud, because phone records suggest that Joey, on the way to this meeting, called his bank. And investigators believe that he may have realized that this money was missing, and he may have confronted Chase about it. If so, that lunch wasn't just a business meeting. It might have been some kind of, argument. Chase would later claim that Joey handed him a stack of blank checks that day to use for future business expenses. But that doesn't add up. If Joey knew that Chase was stealing, why would he give him more access to the account? It's also been suggested, and seems likely, that Joey fired Chase that day. At this point in the story, the family was still missing. There were no bodies, there was no evidence, there was no official suspects. All that remained were 2 people with some clear financial motives. Dan Kavanaugh, who immediately began siphoning money from Joey's business, and Chase Merritt, who had the most to lose if Joey cut him off financially. One of them would eventually be arrested, but was he the only one responsible? By April of 2013, 3 years after the McStay family vanished, San Diego Sheriff's Department still believed that they had crossed into Mexico voluntarily. Lacking any solid leads, they then handed the case over to the FBI, citing that the FBI, they had more resources, especially international wise, and had the best chance of finding the family. But there was no concrete proof that ever surfaced that, they might have had this grainy video where they thought it looked like the McStay family, but there was no information that they actually crossed back into the United States. And despite the FBI's investigations, this case remained a dead end. So let's take a step back for a second. We haven't really talked a whole lot about Joey's brother, Michael. He was one of the first ones to enter Joey's home after the disappearance. He took Joey's computers, later claiming that he only downloaded photos before returning them when the police requested the computer. But let's play devil's advocate. What if he manipulated the search logs in that time frame? Meaning adding information about passports to Mexico, Spanish language software. Did he have the technical skills to even do that? Maybe, maybe not. But he did know someone who did, Dan Kavanaugh. And Michael's behavior didn't really stop there. In March of 2010, and this would be a month, essentially, after the family's been missing, Michael applied for a business loan under Joey's company, Earth Inspired Products, and listed himself as the CEO. And remember, the family is still missing. And then there's this chilling statement. That same month, Michael told someone, quote, "My fear is that I'm looking for 2 adult shallow graves and my 2 nephews' crosses." This was 3 years and 8 months before the McStay family was actually found, buried in shallow graves. Was it just a, tragic guess, or did he know more than he admitted? So let's talk about Dan Kavanaugh. He wasn't just Joey's website manager. He was actually known as Dan the Hacker Kavanaugh, and his role in the business was fairly simple. He optimized Joey's website, driving it to the top of search engines. In return, he was supposed to receive a percentage of the sales that came through on the website. But days after Joey disappeared, Dan started helping himself to the company's money. On February 6th, 2 days after the McStay family vanished, Dan begins withdrawing money from Joey's business PayPal account. He claims he needed that $2,000 to keep the site running. On February 8th, he takes out another $3,000 via e-check. And that's not all. Between February of 2010 and July of 2011, Dan takes a staggering $206,000 from Joey's business. This included $127,000 in PayPal transactions, bank wires and ATM withdrawals totaling nearly $80,000, and he deposited all of it into his own personal account. But here's the big question. If Dan was really in Hawaii at the time of the disappearance, how did he access the accounts? Obviously, surely it was all done online, but did investigators ever track IP addresses to confirm where these transactions were actually originating from? How soon did he return from Hawaii? Because if he said he was in Hawaii and came back before the family was officially considered missing, or even after they were officially considered missing, remember that Michael knows who Dan is. Michael had the computer outside of the house, right? He had taken the computer outside of the house, and we'll get to this. But let's go even further into other things that Dan has done. In March of 2010, again, this is, a month after the family's been missing, Dan sells the entire Earth Inspired Products website for $20,000. The sale was signed under his name, Dan Kavanaugh, an individual. So by this point, he had completely hijacked Joey's company and kind of cashed in. And yet authorities never investigated these transactions. When the case finally went to trial, there was one big problem. The judge refused to allow any of the financial evidence against Dan Kavanaugh. Had it been admitted, could it have created reasonable doubt? At the very least, could it have revealed more than what authorities initially believed? And that's where things remain frustrating because someone got away with the fortune and someone got away with murder. So now we've talked a little bit about the financial motives, this missing money, the suspicious business partner or business associate, but there's still more that doesn't sit right. And we're going to go back to Michael McStay. He knew exactly who Dan Kavanaugh was because when their father, Patrick, first saw the name pop up on his phone, Michael had to explain who Dan was. And yet, when Michael took Joey's computers from the McStay home on February 13th, 2010, he didn't officially report the family missing until 2 days later on the 15th. So during those 48 hours, Michael had access to Joey's personal and business data, banking information, possibly PayPal logins, and search history that could have been manipulated, all while inside a home that showed clear signs that something was wrong. Dogs left with no food or water, the rotting food on the counter, the dirty diapers, the popcorn that was spilled. And yet Michael waited. Did he simply hesitate or did he need time to do something with the computer? Did those computers contain saved login credentials that allowed Dan Kavanaugh to access Joey's PayPal account? And how did Dan Kavanaugh actually access Joey's PayPal account? Could Michael have helped Dan manipulate the search history on the family's computer to plant evidence that the McStays had actually searched for passports to Mexico? The entire case was contaminated from the start. The McStay home was never sealed off as a crime scene. Anyone could enter, and they did. If you think the financial side of this case is messy, the personal side adds yet another layer of suspicion. So Summer McStay had an ex-boyfriend. December 4th of 2009 would have been Summer's birthday. By this point, the McStays, they had already moved to Fallbrook. But before they left, Summer received this really strange email. It read, "I love you forever. Happy birthday, Summer. Forever and ever, Vic." Now, that's not necessarily strange, except for the fact that Summer and Vic had been broken up for over 5 years. What's even stranger is that Vic lived near the McStay's old home in San Clemente. After the McStay family vanished, Vic was arrested at a bar near Joey's office, which was also in San Clemente at the time. Vic had a history of violent threats. He had a past arrest for threatening a neighbor and her daughter. Could Vic have been the reason that the McStays decided to move to Fallbrook? Had Summer been dealing with a stalker? And the police did evidently rule him out as a suspect. But the McStays disappeared on February 4th, 2010, exactly 2 months after Summer's birthday. Coincidence? Some investigators say there are no coincidences in police work, but the police dismissed it. Another thing that kind of came out was a few months before the McStays moved to Fallbrook, something strange started happening to Joey. He began to feel sick. He had episodes of dizziness and nausea, and it happened often enough that he saw multiple doctors, but none of them could figure out what was going on. And then came the rumors. People joked that maybe Summer was doing something to his food. Even Joey's friends told him that maybe he should stop eating at home. Could it have been food poisoning, or was someone slowly poisoning Joey? And if so, why? On November 11th, 2013, at 9:58 a.m., a 911 call comes in. A motorcyclist out for a ride in the Mojave Desert near Victorville spots something chilling, a human skull. Now, Victorville, interestingly, is near Hesperia, and this happens to be where Chase Merritt did his fabrication work, which was one of the reasons why they would meet in Rancho Cucamonga, because it was kind of a halfway point for the both of them to meet and discuss business. So after this 911 call comes in, law enforcement then arrives on the scene, and they discover two shallow graves, just as Michael McStay eerily alluded to years before. Inside, they find four skeletons, and dental records confirmed that it was Joey and Summer McStay. The other two were presumed to be their children, Gianni and Joey Jr. The case, which had dragged on for nearly 4 years, was now officially a homicide investigation under the jurisdiction of San Bernardino County law enforcement. The cause of death? Blunt force trauma. Whoever did this just didn't kill them. They brutalized them. A white extension cord was wrapped around Joey's neck, suggesting that he may have been restrained before he died. A rusty sledgehammer was also found near the remains, believed to be the murder weapon. A pair of rusted handcuffs was also recovered inside one of the graves, and green cargo straps were also found. These possibly could have been used to restrain or transport the bodies. Patrick McStay, Joey's father, never believed that one person could have done all of this alone. Quote, dragging four bodies out into the desert and burying them single-handedly? It's like, no way. And yet, out of all the people with motive, the police only arrested one man. And authorities zeroed in on Chase Merritt as the primary suspect. And here's why. Chase created and deleted multiple fraudulent checks from Joey's business. He then cashed $4,500 worth of checks backdated to February 4th, the day the family vanished. On the 9th, he called QuickBooks and pretended to be Joey, and tried to delete the entire business account. And investigators believe that Joey actually discovered this fraud from Chase before he was killed. When the McStays' Isuzu Trooper was tested, Chase's DNA was found on the steering wheel and the gear shifter. Now, initially, he denied ever driving the car, but later he changed his story, saying that he had driven it a few times. But here's the issue. What exactly does traces of DNA mean? Well, trace DNA could literally come from something as simple as a handshake. But then there's the cell phone data. Chase's cell phone pinged near Victorville on February 6th, 2010, 2 days after the McStays were last seen alive. But also remember, he lives and works in the area of Hesperia, not far from this location. And then you have to think, how did he transport the entire family? Surely he used a vehicle, and surely that vehicle would have evidence, right? Linking back to the McStays. If such evidence existed, it was never publicly disclosed. Chase Merritt was the last person to see Joey alive. But was he the only one involved? Let's not forget, whoever was in the house painting on February 3rd was the last person to see Summer and the kids alive. And what about Dan Kavanaugh, who started draining Joey's business just 2 days after they vanished? Did Chase act alone? Or was there more to this story than we were ever told? After Chase was arrested, Dan Kavanaugh seemed to completely disappear. For 2 years, he went completely off the grid. There were no interviews, no public statements, no trace of him anywhere. He made it very, very difficult to locate. When he did finally resurface, he gave the explanation for his absence. And he claimed that homicide detectives told him to, quote, stay out of Dodge to avoid being found because they believed they had already arrested the right person, Chase Merritt. But does that even make sense? If investigators were so sure that Chase acted alone, why would they feel the need to hide Dan Kavanaugh away? And if Dan was innocent, why would he vanish for 2 years instead of publicly clearing his name? When Chase Merritt finally went to trial, prosecutors laid out their case. Joey had discovered that Chase was stealing from the business in early February of 2010. Backdated checks were created and cashed after the McStay family disappeared. Chase's phone pinged near the burial site where the bodies were found. He called QuickBooks pretending to be Joey and tried to erase financial records. And then there's the surveillance footage. A forensic expert also testified that the vehicle seen leaving the McStay home on February 4th matched Chase Merritt's truck. But wait, wasn't it originally said to be the McStay's vehicle? And if Chase's truck was such an important piece of evidence, why was it never searched for forensic proof? Or if it was, what was the outcome of that? If the prosecution wanted to tie Chase to the crime so strongly, then why wasn't there a single mention of evidence from his truck? Despite these gaps, the jury found Chase Merritt guilty on all 4 counts of murder. On January 21st, 2020, Chase was sentenced to death for the murders of Joey, Summer, Gianni, and Joey Jr. So why does this case still feel so unsolved still? Even after the verdict, there are too many unanswered questions. Many people, including some directly involved in the case, really believe there's more to this story. Did Chase act alone? Yes, he had a financial motive. Yes, he was one of the last people to see Joey alive. Yes, his cell phone pinged near the gravesite. But could one man really pull this off by himself? He would have had to subdue 2 young children without them escaping or screaming for help. He would have had to transport 4 people to the Mojave Desert nearly 100 miles away. He would have to dig graves deep enough to hide an entire family, and he would have to do all of this alone without being seen. This would have taken hours. So did someone help him? Was Chase involved, but not the only killer? Or was he a scapegoat for someone else? Was Dan Kavanaugh more involved than police believed? When Joey disappeared, Dan took control of the online business and drained it of over $200,000. That alone doesn't prove that he was involved in the murders. But here's what's suspicious. He didn't cash in after Joey was found murdered. He cashed in while Joey was still missing. He was questioned but never charged. He left the state and made himself impossible to find for 2 years. Could Dan have been involved in the planning, but not the actual crime itself? Why did the McStay family leave in a hurry? One thing is really, really clear. The whole McStay family left their home unexpectedly. They left food out in the kitchen. They left the dogs behind, something they would never have done if they had planned to be gone very long. So why did they leave? Were they forced at gunpoint to leave? Did someone lure them out, claiming a family member was gravely ill or in an accident or something? Were they tricked into leaving, thinking they'd be back soon? And after all these years, we still don't have any clear answers. Did the right person pay for the crime? If Chase Merritt wasn't the only person involved, why hasn't he talked to someone to help free himself? This could mean, one of 2 things. Like, why hasn't he tattled on somebody else? He really was guilty, and there's no one else to name, or he was framed. Just because his phone pinged near the location doesn't mean that he was actually the one carrying it. There's so much about this case that doesn't add up. It is so easy to get wrapped up in the mystery of it all, the unanswered questions, the financial angles, the what ifs. But at the heart of this case is a freaking family. Joey McStay was a father who built a business and worked hard to give his children a good life. His wife, Summer, was a protective mother who loved her boys fiercely. And Gianni and Joey Jr., they were just 2 innocent kids whose lives were stolen before they could even get a foothold or even understand what was happening at all. Joey's parents will never get their son back. They'll never get their grandkids back. They'll never be able to see them grow up. Jonah has also lost his father, along with 2 little brothers. A good man and his beautiful family, all taken from this world for reasons that are still unclear at best. So now I turn this over to you. Was Chase Merritt truly the sole killer? Did he act alone? Or was there someone else in the shadows, maybe manipulating the whole situation? And seriously, how did Dan Kavanaugh get away with stealing over $200,000 from Joey's business without ever facing charges? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment with your theory. I am genuinely curious about what you think happened. And if you found this case as fascinating as I did, I don't know if that's the right word, don't forget to subscribe or join the channel for early access to upcoming episodes. There's a little join button just right at the very top underneath the banner, and it's only $2.99 a month. Thank you all so much for listening. I love what I do, but more importantly, I appreciate you, the people who actually make this possible. Next week, we're diving into another case. It's a paranormal case, which is really interesting, and it's all about a single item, a box. I can't believe we're actually heading into March already. Anyway, I don't want to get too sidetracked. Until then, stay safe. We will talk really soon. Bye for now.